Hey friends, it's Heather. How are you doing? I wanted to do a little bit of a different weekly message this week. Um, Many of you know, but some of you may not, that I am currently in seminary for um, a program called Certified Ruling Elder or Certified Lay Pastor. It depends on who you talk to. They mean the same thing, which is that I will be a pastor at the end of the program. So I've been studying for two classes this semester, one of which is preaching. And I just wanted to come in today and kind of throw a question out there for discussion that I've been sort of wrestling with a little bit. So, just as a little bit of background, my professor, this is her book, Lillian Daniel is her name. Here's her picture on the back, right there. She's really great. She's the pastor of First Congregational Church in Dubuque, Iowa. I am going to the Dubuque Theological Seminary, so that makes sense. She's written several books and she's been a pastor for a long time and she's a good preacher. So I was really excited to take the class with her. And one of the issues that has come up as we've been submitting our first sermons in that class is the idea of knowing your audience and the idea of worship being a public space that anyone is meant to be welcomed into. And that it requires finessing, like it requires a lot of thought on the part of the preacher, and I think on the part of churches in general. And so I want to talk to you about that today. So in the class, in our lecture, Reverend Daniel was talking about how we can't assume a level of biblical knowledge just because we know our congregation. Because what if there is a visitor who has no biblical experience? What if they've never been to church before? We don't want them to feel, completely left out of the conversation or as though they don't belong at the church. Excuse me. So I understand that. And also, I feel like if we spend the entirety of the sermon unpacking scripture and dogma for this visitor, we're going to lose the rest of our congregation. So, how do we navigate that? What's the answer? I think it's a really hard question. So, last night I went to praise band rehearsal and I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and two friends of mine actually, and they were just sort of wrestling with it as well, saying, yeah, I don't want to, as an established Christian, who has a base of knowledge of the Bible, I don't want to go to square one every single sermon because that's super boring. And I get it. Like if you know the context, or, if you've heard the story 25 times, it's different than if you've never heard it before and you have no idea what context in which it happened or who is speaking or things like that. So I guess as a preacher, I wonder how much context is good and how much is too much, how much is not enough. I personally really enjoy preaching that does a good job of connecting the message of the scripture reading to my everyday life. I want those lines to be drawn. I want that to be unpacked for me clearly, so that, because here's the other thing, written sermons versus hearing a sermon, an auditory reception of a sermon is different. And so I think in that case, we want to always err on simplicity side, because even our most, heady intellectuals in our congregation are still going to need that access to grab that nugget and take it home with them and remember it, right? I think that makes sense. So anyway, that's the basic gist of the discussion, and I would love to hear what you think. Have you been to a church recently that you felt like you couldn't connect with the sermon, and did it have to do with this sort of assumption of biblical knowledge issue, or was it a different issue? What are some preachers that you've heard that you just adored, and what was it about their preaching that you liked. I would love just to hear what you all think about preaching in general. Does preaching turn you off? Are you just like, no, I'm not going to listen to that? Tell me about that. I would love to hear about that too. I think what we have in our community is so different because it's an online community and not an in-person community. So I think we have different opportunities. We have different benefits to that. And of course, there are also some drawbacks to it. But I would just love to hear what you all think about this issue, this topic, and your experiences. And with all that said, I am going to be posting my first sermon that I just turned in on Monday to our group so that y'all can watch it and give me some feedback. And I will tell you that that is super scary for me. And I had never written a sermon properly before this. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking. So I would love to hear what you think. And also please be gentle because it's the very first time I've ever done it. And I know you will be because you're all so wonderful. Okay. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say in the comments. I want to have a nice discussion about this. I hope we can do that. All right. Love you guys. Have a wonderful weekend.